In Bhumi 7, we're told of what the Bodhisattva is like as he basically completes his training to move on to the higher levels. And so, first of all, we're told that he is skillful in the use of phrases in his explanation of all dharmas, and yet he does not seize on any signs of words or sounds. So the main thing that we have here is what all of you do all the time. You use language to teach the Dharma. You use phrases. But the Bodhisattva does not seize upon any of these words as being special. They are just words. And yet he uses them in a skillful fashion. He perceives that all the worlds are fiercely ablaze. I love this passage. Fiercely ablaze with the fires of the three poisons: desire, hatred, and ignorance. He understands that. We live in a world where these three poisons are always present with us and are major elements. And he uses many languages and voices through which the Buddhas inspire delight in all beings when they hear the Dharma. I think that applies to all of you monastics. You're using many languages around the world in order to inspire delight in people when they hear the Dharma. And you yourself often are learning new languages in which you can present it. And all of you, to some degree or other, have faced the challenge of presenting Buddhism in English. So these are elements of the Bodhisattva. He is securely and unshakably established. There's not so much as a single moment in which he rests or desists from his journey. I think this is probably applicable to you in Taiwan. You're unshakable even though the earth shakes. It shakes all around you, but you have remained firm and you have never stopped your teaching. You all joined tonight. I appreciate that. So I think the thing to take from this is there is simply not a time when you say, okay, I'm going to take a rest. Today, I'm going to leave the Dharma behind. I think it's impossible to do that. The Dharma follows us like a shadow, so it's with us at all times. And he always keeps the path of all knowledge directly present before him. He never becomes distracted. And this is what constitutes dhyana paramita. We said that dhyana is jhana, jhana is chand, same character as the character for your school of Buddhism. So this is what constitutes what you are working with. We keep the path of all knowledge always before us. I feel like that's partly what we do when we sit at our computer screens and we have Google on, or we have AI. We have all knowledge directly before us. So the Bodhisattva, and this is something which I think many of you have asked about, and I wanted you to think about it. the Bodhisattva is able to completely fulfill the dharmas for the realization of Bodhi on all 10 levels. There are certain things which you can fulfill on any level that you're practicing, but it is on the 7th level where this ability becomes supreme. So if we are all working hard to practice, we can practice like the Bodhisattva. So often when you ask, how is it that you can have something that belongs in A on number 5? That's what the Bodhisattva has found. But he knows that he can complete that element regardless of where his development is. Certain things he can actually do, and we need to keep that in mind. We may not be enlightened. I certainly am not. We may not be enlightened, but there are things that we can still master in the Buddhist tradition. So therefore, there is no explanation that we can use to say, I'm not at that level. Doesn't matter whether we're at a certain level. We can always do some of the elements. Even preliminary practice, that is, before he enters even the first bhumi, the Bodhisattva has already been practicing things which lead to knowledge. Maybe it's not all knowledge, but it is knowledge. And he is leading to that knowledge as he practices. Then we're told something which you need to think about. The sage king who mounts his precious heavenly elephant roams the 4 continents, well aware that there are poverty-stricken people afflicted with suffering, even as he himself remains unsullied. It is the case that many of us have the situation where we see people at different levels than ourselves. We see some people struggling with issues which we ourselves may not struggle with. And yet, we are not bothered by that because we are like, if we can keep ourselves focused, we can remember that everyone is achieving something at whatever level they are. And so even people who are suffering from afflictions, as you know, I'm just out of the hospital today, and my back is still healing. And I understand that I am afflicted with suffering from a broken spine, but yet the rest of me has grown stronger. It's a very strange feeling. It's like I have this one weak spot in my back, but all around it and my legs, my arms, everything else is getting stronger. And that's exactly what happens when we're doing a spiritual practice. We will achieve certain things at a given moment because of what's going on in our lives at that moment. And we can even, as we go through the day and see people who are suffering, we understand what they're going through, but it doesn't help them if we panic. It doesn't help them if we give way to despair. It really helps them for us to remain unsullied, if you will. So not yet. And I think this is why I put the little sticker on. Maybe we need to put the sticker on our refrigerator. Not yet. Not yet. Doesn't say we won't get there. Sure, I'm not yet there. Sure, there are things which I have not yet accomplished. There are levels I have not yet reached. Not yet, but it doesn't say that I won't get it. It doesn't say that I'm not working on it. It doesn't say that other things are beginning to happen. So I need to stop worrying when I have to say, not yet. I had to do that today. I came back from the hospital and immediately I wanted to take my usual walk. And I was so disappointed because about halfway through it, I realized I was just too weak to make the full walk that I was accustomed to. And I had to remind myself, not yet. That's all. Not yet. Keep walking. One day I'll make that walk, but not yet. So don't worry when you have a not yet on your refrigerator. Let that be a comfort to you. That just because it's not yet doesn't mean you won't do it. The Bodhisattva, we're told, he surpasses anything which you can think of, from Devas, 4 heavenly kings. But he never lets loose of the mind that delights in the Dharma. It's very easy if you become the top person in your field or you make enormous progress. It doesn't matter if you have achieved a lot of things. You cannot have the achievement stand in the way of holding on to the mind that still delights in the Dharma. Somebody asked me, this is my 70th year of studying Buddhism. Can you believe it? I've been studying it for 70 years and I know so little, gosh. But when I get up in the morning, it's like this morning I got up and I was really excited because I was working for my US class on the spread of Buddhism. And I've been working on the idea of other roads, not just the Silk Road, not just the Maritime Road, but the glass road, the spread of glass. And I knew that today I got to research the history of glass. And it was so interesting to me. I delighted in it. And that was Dharma to me. Dharma is when you deal with things the way they really are. And the way they really are is their history often. Then they use the metaphor. He set sail in the ship of the Paramitas. I love that. He goes out onto the ocean of ultimate reality. And how in the world is he able to do that? He does it by his reliance on the power of vows. That says the not yet, okay, not yet, but have we made the vow, I will someday achieve it. I will someday take my full walk. I vow. I take that as a vow. And I use that vow to give me energy, to give me the strength to continue to do things. So whatever it is that we need and to deal with when we're on the ocean in the ship of the Paramitas, the perfections, perfections which we may never really achieve totally ourselves. That's very possible that we will not in this life. But I do have my vows, and my vows give me the strength to keep working. So it's very important to make some vows. So when we say he surpasses everything, devas, dragons, yakshas, Gandharvas, all of the gods and spirits of the Indian world, he has surpassed everybody. But his mind still delights in the Dharma. And that's the crucial point. So why do you do it? Why do we struggle so much? We do it to get merit. But merit is a very tenuous thing. Merit is something which I must use. How am I going to use my merit? You can say, well, I'll just transfer it. But you have to first use your merit yourself before you transfer it to others. You must use your own merit first. Then you make a transfer. If you have not used your own merit, then you have broken one of the Buddhist recommendations. Never do anything for others that you haven't done for yourself. As they say in the airlines, when the oxygen mask drops down, use it on yourself first and then help others. The Buddhists knew that a long time ago. Make sure you do it for yourself first. Now, light. Light is one of the most amazing, mysterious, and haunting things that we face every day. And of course, the major light for all of us is the sun. We have stars, we have the moon, we have the planets, but none of them can even approach the intensity of the sun. In India, they describe this by monsoons. If you don't have a monsoon climate, I think you can't quite appreciate this picture. If you have a monsoon climate, some of the time your streets are flooded and you're up to your waist in water. And other times when it's dry season and the sun has evaporated all the water and you're riding down a dusty street, you can hardly remember when it was covered with water. All of us, in a sense, live a life that is like a monsoon climate. There are times when life gives us success, comfort, health, youth. And then there are times when life gives us illness, old age, ill health. So we go from a street that's filled with the water of life to a dusty, dusty road that we have to traverse. And we need to understand this. But this shows you the power of the light of the sun. The only thing from the sun that hits us is its light. That's what we deal with. So the Bodhisattva, he has two jobs. One, he has to put out his fire, and yet he has to help douse other people's at the same time. And that's your task in life, isn't it? You're monastics. You have to douse your own fire. You have to deal with your own feelings every day. And yet at the same time, you must help other people deal with theirs. And it's that which you need to figure out how to do it and still keep all the energy and force of your work in front of you. The insatiable pursuit of goodness. We all need to constantly think how to be good. It's really hard. It's really hard to think, how can I be better than I am now? How can I do that? I feel like I'm giving it my all. I feel like I'm just using up all my energy. I'm out there in this world. So how can I have an insatiable in the sense and never stop wanting goodness? I want to have goodness in my life. I want to help others to have goodness. And then in the seventh Bhumi, and this, of course, I like very much. I hope you'll forgive me as a professor. He entirely fathoms the many kinds of worldly skills, the classical texts, books, literary skills, and as for spiritual practice, the dhyanas, samadhis, he cultivates all such endeavors to a point of complete mastery. A lot of people sometimes ask me, how do I practice every day? And I feel sometimes ashamed to say, I use my books. That's my practice today. I use my skill. I use that and concentrate on it. And that's partly how I practice Buddhism. I don't say that it's the right way or even that it's the best way, but it's the way which seems to work for me. And so it pleased me to find in the Dashabhumika Sutra that this is what a bodhisattva does too. So I may not do very many things that a bodhisattva does, but maybe this one little thing, I'm like a bodhisattva. I read books, I study. So this comes to the end of the Bhumi. This is the path of the purification of skillful means and wisdom. In that sense, it's a wonderful level to achieve. If we can come to this path of purification, far-reaching. So you look down this road, it reaches far, it goes far. Far-reaching, the path of skillful means, where I try to perfect the ways in which I teach, the way in which I present the Dharma, and the wisdom that comes with it. Now, light. We're told in the sutra early on that the Bodhisattva was sitting there and he sent forth a ray of light that illuminated the whole many worlds. And using that light, he taught. Whatever could it mean that you teach just by flashing lights? at one level, I read that and think, well, I've never seen this flash of light. I don't quite understand how light can be a teacher. So as I did the research for this, and as I read more and more deeply into what light is, I was totally amazed at just how profound light is and how important it is for us to be ready to accept what light can teach us. It can teach us a lot. I've learned a lot today and yesterday and the day before, thinking about a ray of light. The ray of light illuminates many worlds. Light can shine through things which were really dark and make them known. And there is a kind of internal light which works very well for me. That is when I read, when I work with a topic, like I worked with the glass roads, then it illuminates many worlds for me. I understand so much more than I did before. Light is the one thing which can do away with darkness. Nothing else. There is nothing else but light that can do this. So how can I have an illumination? Part of it comes through knowledge. Part of it comes through practice. Part of it comes through compassion. But light, I need to think more about. What is light? I had never asked that question before. What really is light? And light is one of the rays. Look at the right-hand image. Look what a tiny portion of the rays of that we experience, which is light, very, very small part. Infrareds are much bigger. Ultraviolet rays are enormous. X-rays are great. Gamma rays, short wave, the radio, radar, FM, TM. I mean, all of those are like light. But the visible light that I have before me means the light which gives me color. Light that allows me to see color. If you can't see color, you cannot see form. There is no perceived form without color. If I look at just a white screen, I see no form whatever. The minute I add a little color, suddenly it comes alive with perceived form. That's why I tell the story of how I got started working with some of the computer world, some of the young man who said he was going to teach me something very important in a tenth of a second. And he filled the screen with 1 million blue points. And for a tenth of a second, he turned one of them red. And I saw it. And he said, do you know what you just did? You disambiguated 1 out of 1 million in a tenth of a second. Light is a wonderful teacher. Who else could teach me to differentiate 1 out of 1 million in a tenth of a second? Imagery and perceived form can do so much for us. We depend upon it. We need to think about light that teaches us. So when we read that the Bodhisattva sent forth this ray of light, and you think, well, how in the world does he teach with a ray of light? Light is teaching us right at this moment. It's all around us. And we are not aware of how much it teaches us. For example, light teaches us some things that are non-visual. Light is what gives us the circadian rhythm of life. The circadian rhythm is, if you look at it, it's like your day. You wake up in the morning and you have the red, you're energetic, you can do things. And then when the light begins to fade, the light then starts melatonin in our brain. And it stays and causes us to be sleepy for about 8 hours. That's light. Light is controlling us. It's controlling our sleep. When the dawn begins to break, then the melatonin release stops. When it stops, in a short period of time, we wake up. And then sometimes we try to go back to sleep, but we can't, because the light has already taught us it's time to get up. We have no melatonin, so we can't go back to sleep. Might as well get up and start work. So I love it to think that light can even change the way I live my life every day. It's that powerful. It's that strong. I am influenced by it at every moment. Well, Charles Kao from Hong Kong, Charles Kao transformed our world by finding out something about light, and he won the Nobel Prize for it. What he found out was that you can focus light and send it down a small tube at the speed of light and transmit information anywhere you have a cable that can carry that light. We used to think that the fastest way to do information was through satellites, but it's not. The fastest way to communicate is with fiber optic cables, and they are laying them across the ocean floor all the time. And so what's happening to us tonight, most of it has been transmitted by light. This class, the words I have said, the picture of myself, the picture of yourselves on my screen, all of that has come via light. It's just light. Light is such an incredible thing in our lives. And we can do so much with it. And it can transform the very nature. I don't know how the Buddhists knew that light was so powerful. And yet I do know they were such good observers. They observed the world very, very closely. And through their observation, they came to the conclusion that if a bodhisattva wanted to teach everywhere in the world, the thing he would use would be light, not sound. Sound is very slow compared to light. And if you see a train at a distance, you'll see it move, and then you'll hear it much later. Or if you watch an airplane flying overhead, you know that when you look where the sound comes from, you'll never see the airplane. You must use light to see the plane, and it's moving so fast that the sound is not with the plane. The sound is far behind it, and it confuses us because we're looking in the wrong place for the plane. We need to be always aware that light is what teaches us. Light is what gives us the immediacy of life. Light, that light which beams from that bodhisattva. We have it. It's around us all the time. And it's through the light that we have this immense amount of information that we have before us. AI, the computer, Google, Baidu, chatbots, whatever form of information transfer we use, the immensity of it is because we have learned to capture the power of light to teach and to inform us. So I shouldn't be so surprised when the Bodhisattva in the Dashabhumika sends forth a ray of light. The Buddhists knew that that's the way it works. They knew it a long time ago. And I have had to learn it lately. Mainly, we communicate through language. We have to put our words into language. It's got to be in some language or other in order to be communicated. Now, all of you have faced, many of you face this as monastics. You're in situations where the language around you is not the language of Buddhism. It's not Chinese. It's not Sanskrit. It's Spanish, German, Russian, whatever it is. We understand that language is what communicates. And we think, therefore, that language is communicated to us, and that's where we get all of our information. It's from sound, not light. But as we've just said, it's light that transmits the sound to us. If we didn't have any of the light transmissions, we would only be able to speak to someone directly in front of us. And in the early days of humans, that was the case. All you had was the oral word of somebody standing in front of you. And if they weren't there and speaking, all you had was your memory. And yet, what has happened to us is like what the Buddhists had, in a sense, predicted. If you want to transmit this message far and wide, you're going to have to do it with light. You can't just do it with sound. You can't just do it with face-to-face, as important as that is. So how do I make sense out of data? I can receive it. I can receive it over the fiber optic cable. I can receive it by listening to you speak the words to me. I can receive it as 0 and 1s in the computer. There are many ways in which I can receive data. But how do I make sense of it? It's just like what I've currently said to you. I'm trying to teach about what I've been trying to figure out for myself. Why did the Buddhists feel that the Bodhisattva could teach by light? I had to really think long and hard about that. I had to consider and deal with it. I had to make sense of it. Some of you said, how do you make sense of data? How do you make sense out of data? And of course, the answer is that we have to think carefully about what the data states. And we have to think carefully what the data says about the human receptor. We are the receptor of knowledge. So how do we receive? Sometimes through our eyes, sometimes through our ears, sometimes through our nose, through our tongue. I mentioned durian fruit before. The tongue gives you a lot of information about durian, so does the nose. The smell of durian, the taste of durian, we learn through our senses, our sensorium. So that's where we start when we're trying to figure out making sense out of data. It has to make sense in terms of how we are receptors, how we are receivers of information. How does our body take in information? And how do we preserve it? How do we have memory? These are all human issues, basic human issues. And that's one of the ways in which we can deal with making sense out of data. And then one last image, the campfire. Humans have sat around a campfire from earliest of days. And I've tried to think, why was the campfire so important to early humans? Well, first of all, of course, the light was caused by burning fuel. The fire that was at the campfire gave warmth. It also allowed them to see and illuminated a certain area around them. But it also needed a community. The campfire was a community of people. They sat together. And as they sat there, looking into the burning embers of the fire, they shared. They talked about things that mattered to them. And that's what we do when we have our sessions. We may not have a campfire, but people come and sit in your office, and you have to communicate with them and they with you. And sometimes a committee of people from the temple come and have a meeting. In that community of people, you have to decide how to make them function better. And part of it is light. They're going to look at your face. They're going to get an impression of what you're thinking. No matter how we are, people look at our face. We don't. Our face is forever hidden from us. I'm behind my face, and when I look in a mirror, of course, I see a reversed image of my face. It's not really quite me. And I don't even recognize me sometimes because I don't see me all the time. I'm behind it. But others are in front. And others see, and others have experiences which I don't have. So I'm one of those people who struggles with trying to understand the Buddhist text, to understand it in terms of myself first, before I ask anybody else to understand it. I have to figure out, how do I understand it? Now, I may not be right, and I may not even be good at it, but that's what I have to do. And I need to be always aware that I must improve, I must improve, I must improve. I must never think that I have mastered it. Because the minute you think you've mastered and have perfection, then you can relax and say, well, I don't have to do anything more. I have it. I've got it. I remember many years ago, nobody was able to run a 4-minute mile. No runner was ever clocked at actually running a 4-minute mile. And it was the goal. And finally, one day in Canada, Roger Bannister did it. He was clocked very accurately, and he ran in 4 minutes and 3 seconds a mile. But he didn't have long to glory in his achievement. Within a few days, 5 people had broken through and run the 4-minute mile. All it took was for people to feel it's possible. It's possible. If that person can do it, so can I. And that's something which we have to constantly keep in front of us. If we do achieve something, and if we do learn something, and we are able to describe the Buddhist teachings to someone else, then they may be able for the first time to think, it's possible to be this way. It's possible to have this Buddhist teaching. It's possible to run the 4-minute mile of Buddhism. If that person can do it, why can't I? So this ends our lectures on the Dashabhumika Sutra. I know they've been very short in a way, long in another. I'm sure you feel it's a long hour. But it is a text where I feel if you go through it and you pick out all the things it says to do, you have a complete description of how to live a Buddhist life. It's all in there. If somebody says, how should I be as a Buddhist? If you can explain and help them through the Dashabhumika Sutra, they will know more than most people ever know about how to be a Buddhist, how to live a life as a Buddhist, how to use light, how to use sound, how to use all the ways in which something is communicated to us. So thank you all for joining this class.